Tim woke up in the hospital and didn't know anything about himself or what he'd been up to, so he decided to go to the homeless shelter nearby to figure things out. He lived there as a beggar for 2 years until one day, a surprising car showed up at the auto repair shop where he worked. Most folks think amnesia only happens in movies, but it happened to me. I still don't know who I am or where I'm from, thought Tim as he pushed his grocery cart full of his few belongings. 2 years ago, he woke up in a hospital with a strange head wound and no memory. The doctors said his memories would come back, but he had no wallet or ID. So Tim had to start over. He picked a name and tried to make a life for himself. With nowhere else to go, he ended up at the homeless shelter. The police couldn't find anyone missing who matched him. Tim felt a sadness he couldn't shake, even though he couldn't remember why. He had to leave the shelter eventually, but he wasn't ready. So he became a beggar, wandering the streets. He collected his things in his shopping cart, his only possession. People offered him odd jobs, but without any info or a home, he couldn't take them. Over the next 2 years, Tim moved through 5 cities, although he never forgot where he woke up to the amnesia. There was something beautiful about it. It was a small town near the ocean called Cape Elizabeth in Maine. He often saw by his pier and enjoyed the lulling sounds of the waves. However, he had moved on to try to survive. Eventually, he reached Pennsylvania, and a kind man at a mechanic's shop offered him a job and a place to stay. At first, he only cleaned up grease and helped the other repairers. But they soon discovered Tim's impressive knowledge of cars, something even he was surprised to learn. So he started working on changing tires, cleaning windows, polishing, services, and more. They later let him diagnose issues under supervision and marveled at his accuracy. Soon, Tim had steady clients who requested him, and it seemed like his life was on the upswing. By now, he had lost all hope that he might remember who he was. However, his new life wasn't half bad. The shop owner, Mr. Caruso, who gave him the job, was a decent man. He often bought him a beer at the end of the shift. He made friends with 2 mechanics, Bob and Austin, who always made him laugh. They were much younger than him. Tim wasn't sure about his age, but he had to be around 40. Bob and Austin were in their 20s, but they were still cool men to talk to, and Tim was comfortable around them. He told them about his life over the past 2 years. That was all he remembered. Even though Tim had sort of accepted that he had lost his memories, the younger guys wanted to help him. "I think we should take you to the doctor. It might cost a bit, but we can save up for a few months and make an appointment," Bob suggested, and Austin agreed. "Yeah, we can do that. I don't think an appointment with a brain doctor or whatever will be too expensive," Austin added. "We'll see what the doctor says and take it from there, whether it's tests or surgery." "Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. But honestly, I think I'm okay. Maybe I forgot my old life for a reason," Tim said, shaking his head as he noticed a new customer. Later, his friends asked again if he was sure, and Tim repeated that he felt fine. His life had started out strange and confusing, but now he was proud of where he was. He wasn't begging on the streets anymore and had a decent place to live. Sure, he could save up to see a doctor and make sure everything was all right. But right now, his main goal was to save enough money for an apartment deposit and keep working. He loved cars and figured maybe he used to be a mechanic. Either way, he believed the universe had brought him to where he was supposed to be. A few months after that talk, an older man brought in a vintage car with a flawless exterior. Tim didn't speak to the client directly. He seemed to be friends with Mr. Caruso, so they went to his office, leaving Tim to work on the car. He was happy about it and got to work checking everything. The vehicle seemed fine, but something inside the engine made Tim frown. It was a Band-Aid, old and worn with age. Usually, he would take it off and move on, but something about it was odd. Suddenly, a flash of memory passed through his mind. An old man's face, smiling. He was taller than Tim, or maybe Tim had been a child back then. But most of all, he remembered a meaningful conversation. "What's going on, Grandpa?" he asked in a high-pitched tone. "Ah, kid, I don't know. I don't think we can fix this ourselves," the old man answered. "Why? What's wrong? You said every man should know how to fix their cars, and you know everything," little Tim continued. "Do you remember that your mom healed you when you had a cold, but you've had to go to the doctor for your leg later?" The older man questioned, and Tim nodded. "Well, it's like that. We can fix simple things, but this car is sick. He needs a car doctor." "I have an idea," little Tim said and rushed to his room. The memory flashed through little Tim's childhood home, evoking even more familiar things. However, the boy returned and placed a Band-Aid where his grandfather had been touching it. "When I broke my leg, my mom put a Band-Aid and took me to the hospital. We can go now, Grandpa." The older man laughed heartily and nodded at the boy. "Let's go then." "Alex." "Alex, that's my name," Tim said, standing straight and looking at nothing. But his expression was shocked. All his memories rushed back even faster now. His whole life had returned to his brain as if someone had restored all the deleted files from a computer. It was all there. His name, his family, his friends, and most of all, the realization that he shouldn't have been on the streets begging or even living on a minimum wage. Tim, or Alex, was a business owner and was worth millions. Mr. White, a voice distracted him from his reverie, and suddenly he realized that the older man who brought the car was Jerry, his driver from several years ago when he first became successful. Jerry, he breathed, shocked. Mr. White, what are you doing here? You're fixing cars? Why? What happened? Jerry questioned, concerned. You know Tim? Mr. Caruso asked, frowning. Tim? Nate, that's Mr. White, my old boss, Jerry said, pointing at Alex. What, boss? Mr. Caruso didn't understand. Bob and Austin approached after hearing the confusing exchange. Everyone looked at their friend for an explanation, and Alex sighed deeply. It's back. My memory is back, Alex announced. This car did it. Jerry's car? Mr. Caruso questioned. Yes. Jerry was my driver several years ago in New York. When he retired, I gave him my grandfather's old car as a thank you, Alex explained. I didn't know my grandfather never took the Band-Aid off. Everyone was still confused, so Alex had to go back to the beginning. He explained the first memory that flashed and how he recalled everything thanks to the Band-Aid. Furthermore, he revealed his real identity. He also had to tell Jerry everything that happened in the last 2 years. Jerry couldn't contain his shock. Mr. White, that's insane. Why didn't anyone look for you? Is Cindy still working for you? I'm calling her right now, his retired driver said, grabbing his phone. Cindy was just as surprised as anyone. She and other executives had tried to find Alex, but they thought he had voluntarily disappeared for a while. Cindy said that he found an entry on your computer where you talk about leaving everything behind and going to your grandmother's hometown, Jerry explained. Apparently, they held down the fort with your company until you returned. She says she always made sure to deposit your profits. They can't wait to have you back. That's nice, Alex nodded, sitting down. Mr. Caruso had pulled some chairs and all work at the shop had stopped while they figured out some things. But suddenly, Bob spoke up. Wait, if you remember everything now, can you remember what happened? Why did you get amnesia? Was it an accident? He asked, and all eyes turned to him. I remember, and that's something I wish I had forgotten for good, Alex said, making everyone even more curious. I did write in my computer journal that I wanted to get away and get where I grew up. Living in the city is tiring and I missed Maine and the cold ocean. That's where you grew up, Jerry nodded. Yeah, my grandparents raised me in a modest home and environment. Grandpa taught me to repair cars and fish while grandmother cared for both of us. He continued his story. She was comfort, and I wanted that back. Money isn't everything. At some point, you feel lost. Okay, but what happened? Bob urged, and they all laughed. I met up with some old friends. Both my grandparents are gone, and I sold their house not realizing I would miss it. But several of my old friends were still in town. We had a great time and they loved hearing about my success. Not many people leave that town ever, so I was a novelty. It made me feel a little proud, Alex began. We drank. We cheered. It was a crazy night. So you got into a drunk driving accident? Austin guessed. No, nothing like that. My friends, if you can call them that, and I were walking down a road. Suddenly, they started talking about how it wasn't fair that I was successful. If they weren't, how they couldn't believe it. The last thing I remember after that, before waking up in the hospital, was a huge pain on the back of my skull, Alex revealed. No, Bob and Austin said in unison. Yeah, since I woke up without my wallet or my Rolex, I'm pretty sure they stole them and left me. Maybe they even thought I was dead, Alex said, his eyes downcast. That's horrible, Jerry said, his hand covering his mouth in distress. People are awful. Jealousy clouds everything, Mr. Caruso added, shaking his head. Yeah, Alex muttered. You know, I feel like my mind knew what had happened, because I walked around with such sadness after waking up from the hospital. It didn't feel like it was sadness from losing my memories, though. It was more. It was this memory. I think the amnesia helped me heal from it. Do you know their names? We have to call the police, Jerry said, and everyone agreed. Yeah, we're calling the police, Alex nodded. I can take you back to the city and help you with everything, Mr. White, his retired driver continued, and Alex was touched. I told you this before. Please call me Alex, Jerry said, Alex, smiling and giving the man's shoulder a friendly pat. And thank you. Thank you for taking care of this car. Thank you for finding me, even though you didn't know who I was. No, Alex, Jerry replied, his lips pursed. When I retired, you gave me this car and a great retirement package that helped my wife and me a lot. And your kindness when I worked for you meant everything. Good deeds come back to you in the end. Alex couldn't find more words. He went to his small room in the back, gathered his things, and bid farewell to Bob, Austin, and Mr. Caruso, thanking them for everything. He promised to come back soon, then left with Jerry. They called the police, finally giving them a date and names to investigate in this old, strange case. Luckily, his old friends didn't resist and confessed to everything, hoping for leniency. But Alex didn't care much about them anymore. They deserved punishment, but he had moved on. Stinty caught him up on everything, and he was surprised to find that all his executives were happy to see him back. Alex slipped back into his life as if no time had passed, but he was changed. He wasn't feeling lost or depressed anymore. His company grew, and he even invested in Mr. Caruso's auto shop. Bob and Austin were trained for better positions and eventually took on more important roles. Alex visited them often and sometimes worked on cars with them. He never regretted his time with Amnesia. It happened for a reason.